fairly recently joined MDA Space as the Senior Manager of Enterprise and Business Systems. And my role here really is to ensure that we've got the right technology in place to enable all of the cool space tech that we're supporting within Canada. Prior to that, I was responsible for IT at Purdy's Chocolatier, and I've done really the vertically integrated manufacturer tour in Vancouver, if you will, of different companies. But today's session, I'm quite excited to share with you because over the past few years, I've heard time and time again, I want a cloud strategy, whether it's from boards, owners, or others. And so this session is a culmination of that. So hopefully there's something that you can take away here if you're receiving similar requests, because at the end of the day, we have to get to the bottom of what does that request mean? A cloud strategy means all things to all people. And the goal here is to make sure that we're all on the same page so that we can have educated discussions around compliance, architecture, governance, as well as the technology and how we can best enable the businesses that we're supporting. So here we go. Let's get our heads into the clouds. So the cloud strategy in a lot of ways has become the great equalizer. Clouds offer scalability, increased security and cost savings. What's great is that you can choose a solution for a short term, really only pay as you go, buy what you need, and then move on to the next thing. However, with these resources being available more so than ever before, it does mean that shadow IT is continuing to get a leg up in all of our organizations. When the business needs something, they don't want to wait. They often actually even identify their requirements with different tools that they're learning about. So the rules of the game are really evolving, and it's fairly high stakes for all of us IT and security professionals, because we want to make sure that we've got the right tools to do the job and that we have a secure environment. So with this, cloud strategy can mean a different variety of things to your business partners. On the finance side, they may be thinking that it could be cost savings, although many have horror stories of cost increases if they don't fully understand the licensing models. For the business, it's an opportunity to change and an opportunity to spin up a tool that may help them with a short-term problem or a problem that's been a long-term plague for them that they've only recently learned of a tool that is ready to go without a full requirements analysis and RFP process required. And for our dev and infrastructure teams, often it's the ability to be able to manage and spin up environments very easily and have some assurance that perhaps security is already being considered. But at the end of the day, we do have to ask ourselves, is this really the promised land? Or is there potentially a storm brewing? I believe that this is a consideration that we should be talking with our business partners about, because lock-in is real with some of the vendors. There are security implications, especially when you think about what types of data you're storing in the clouds and what clouds you're using. And technology ownership has become a big question as well. So if somebody pulls out their credit card and decides to purchase licenses for a tool, who then owns and maintains that application, and who's responsible to support it once it's been launched into your environment? Almost guaranteed your help desk will be the first person to receive a call about a tool that they may not know anything about. So this is where partnership between IT and the business and security becomes key. This takes us to our first poll to kick things off. So Jason, this one's for you. The poll is, where within your strategy does cloud fit into your priorities? Are you currently in the exploratory phase? Do you have migrations already planned? Do you perhaps have some tools in your environment and you have an intentional hybrid strategy? Or do you have a cloud-first approach? So we'll leave this poll up for a couple of minutes while you all get your answers in. There is no wrong answer with any of these polls, so that's the good news if you're a little bit sluggish after lunchtime, since we're afternoon, no matter where you are in Canada. All right, let's take a first look at these results. So it looks like for the most part, we do have a hybrid environment in place. That is really the winner for almost 43% of you. A cloud-first approach for 36% of you, which actually surprises me a little bit, and it's fascinating. So I would love if you would drop into the chat which industries you're in, if you have either a cloud-first approach or hybrid already in place. Migrations are planned for 14% of us and exploratory for 7%. So thank you for participating with that. Now, the cloud promises are quite wide. The different CSPs have promised innovation and acceleration, access to tools. There's more rapid implementation than ever before because really it's as easy as pulling out a credit card for some of these SaaS or software as a service solutions. Prototyping within the platform as a service has become very easy for developers to be able to spin up environments and run all sorts of tests with the business. Scalability and elasticity in terms of volume and resources and workload management has become a key benefit of Paas and IaaS as well. And automation to ensure that we've got continuous integration and continuous development, as well as strong deployment processes that actually do some of this quality adherence for us, has become a benefit too. Cost management, minimum commitments are often touted, flexible licensing models, pay for use when it comes to licensing and also for data or resources. And then finally, security has been a big selling point. And this is an important topic that we're going to cover in depth a little later on. But many of the CSPs do promise assurance within what they're delivering to us. And what's important to understand is exactly how each offering can align to different compliance models and to your industry and the data that you specifically are working with. So next, we'll take a quick look at the cloud model overview. It's important to recognize that there's many more as a services than just these three, but in its simplest form today, we're going to touch on software as a service, platform as a service, and infrastructure as a service. And to really simplify things, and this is more for you to be able to bring back to your business partners than anything else, software as a service is really to enable business. It's services that are consumed. So whether it is a tool like RingCentral that we're using to do this presentation, or perhaps Shopify to enable quick e-commerce, these are tools that are at your fingertips. They're already pre-configured. So for the most part, other than setting yourself up with some minor configurations, you are ready to go. And so often, we'll touch on this shortly, IT is not even needed is what is touted with Saas. Platform as a service is really tools that enable development teams through services that are used to build. So this allows them to streamline a lot of their development by having access to the right environments and then automating some of their deployment procedures as well. And this can help accelerate development and minimize time to market. Infrastructure as a service are tools that are designed to enable your infrastructure team. Really, it's all about how things are hosted, where they're virtualized, and minimizing hardware investments. Another view of the cloud model overview is this, which shows us really the siloed view of how applications, data, runtime, middleware, operating systems, virtualization, servers, storage, and networking are managed and maintained. So everything in blue on this chart is what you are responsible for. And across the top, we have the different platforms or the models that are being used. So on-prem, you are responsible for everything, from the implementation through the maintenance, deployment, and eventual sunsetting. This is all on you or me, our IT organizations. For infrastructure as a service, applications, data, runtime, middleware, and operating systems fits within your purview. With platform as a service, the focus is applications and data. And software as a service, really almost everything has been offloaded to the CSP or cloud service provider. Now, why do we care about this? We care because models matter. You want to make sure that you're choosing the right tool for the job. Just as you wouldn't choose a spoon to dig yourself out of a snowstorm, you wouldn't choose a flamethrower to clear your driveway. If you do, it might actually satisfy the job, but it's overkill. So it's a waste of energy or resources. And this is where having the right maturity level within an organization to select the right tools and adhere to governance is key to ensuring availability and quality as well. So the management of these tools and understanding how they're going to be used in their selection all pairs hand in hand. We're now going to move into looking at the models in a little bit more depth. So we will begin by talking about Saas. Now, Saas's most common use cases and benefits are that it's the great enabler. No IT is needed. I'm sure many of us have sat through different sales pitches with all sorts of solutions where you don't need the IT team, the business can run the software themselves. There's no issue at all. With that, it can be fantastic for small organizations, whether it's a startup or just a smaller business that doesn't have deep pockets. It can be very helpful for middle-sized organizations that just want to experiment with different technology as well, or need something in short term in order to address an issue. And for large behemoth organizations, it can also be particularly helpful for them to choose tools so they can experiment and see, is something appropriate? What's great about SaaS solutions is that they do take into account best practices and industry standards in many cases. So when you're selecting a tool, whether it's a CRM or an e-commerce platform, you're not having to start from the drawing board and really invest in reinventing the wheel. You've got something available to you that, in theory, has taken into account all of the key workflows that are needed. At the end of the day, with SaaS, it's all pay for play. And in many cases, businesses have the ability to choose a tool that's affordable to them, which can help them with profitability at the end of the day. Now, with SaaS comes all sorts of challenges and risk considerations as well. There can be vendor lock-in, as there is across the board with any of these solutions. Data security still needs to be a consideration as well, because what you put into the cloud, you are responsible for as an organization. There are limitations to what is possible with the tool too. So the features that you receive are what is out of the box. Configuration is usually possible, so maybe you can make some small modifications to a workflow as it has been designed, or you can change some of the branding or look and feel, but there is little to no room for customization, which doesn't leave a lot of room for differentiation either. So if you are in a special niche market or there's something that you need to do, SaaS solutions may not be exactly the tools that you want to be investing in. Performance and downtime management is also an area that you need to carefully monitor. So with SaaS, you are not in control. And if there is an outage or downtime, you sometimes need to even set up your own notifications to ensure that you have visibility into what's happening. And it is on you in order to report any downtime that's been experienced if you want to receive credits that are due. So with that, we will go to our next poll. Is a SaaS strategy on your roadmap? Now, based on the results from the last poll, I would expect to see a whole lot of yes here. The options that you have to choose from are SaaS is leveraged primarily by Shadow IT. We have at least one SaaS solution. I'd be surprised if there's anybody with absolutely none. We have embraced several SaaS solutions, and we have adopted a SaaS first strategy. So please get your votes in, and then we'll take a look at the results as we chat about SaaS. We'll give you about 5 more seconds. And the results are in. So it looks like the majority, or 47%, have embraced SaaS solutions. That doesn't surprise me. Even within the business that I'm in, which is a highly regulated space, we are looking to SaaS solutions to satisfy a lot of productivity needs. The next highest was we have at least one SaaS solution in place at 41%, and we have adopted a SaaS first strategy, 2 of you at 12%. So thank you very much for responding to the poll. Next up, we are going to chat about platform as a service. So platform as a service really is, in a sense, the great innovator for development teams. It's sometimes sold as development environments without maintenance concerns. Allow your developers to really take on managing the environments into their own hands so that they can ensure that they've got the tools available at their fingertips in order to do their best work quickly and efficiently and reduce time to market. It does enable teams to streamline their own workflows, and it can really ease some partnerships between external vendors and in building integrations. So I've seen some good combinations of SaaS and Paas together in order to enable different applications to speak to each other. And then all 3 of these cloud models do marry very nicely as long as you have a strong architecture. The flexibility and scalability opportunities too with Paas are definitely worth talking about and considering. It may take a little bit of change management and ensuring that the dev team is properly educated and they understand the dependencies, but it can give agile teams a great environment to do some rapid prototyping and testing in, and also allows them to really take advantage of CI/CD or continuous integration, continuous development, so that they can work together on different streams of code and push them and merge them and have automated processes to ensure the delivery and the quality. And last, reducing development time and increasing affordability is always a positive thing. Particularly this year with COVID, we've seen some pressure in trying to reduce costs and make sure that cloud tools and the cloud delivery of what we have available is constantly available. Now, there are some risks as well that should be mentioned. Data security is another big one. So here, you need to ensure that your developers do understand compliance concerns and perhaps have even had some OWASP training to ensure that they understand the management of data as well. The environment complexity does increase when you've got the ability to spin up additional environments, virtual environments, sort of at will. There can be legacy and compatibility issues with the old applications that you've got as well. So if you are living in a hybrid environment where there's some on-prem tools that you have that are ages old and maybe don't even have APIs for connections, you could run into a situation where you're investing a lot to rework things in order to then build an additional module or component for it. Vendor lock-in is also quite real. So it's important to understand how the development team is going to be working going forward, and they should partner with either an architecture group or at least be thinking through their future architecture in order to future-proof the choices that are being made. Here, the trade-off is reducing operational burden means loss of a little bit of additional control. So this takes us to our next poll. Is platform as a service a strategy that is on your roadmap? With your options being Paas applications are not fully understood within my organization. We have only just begun to explore Paas. Our teams have embraced Paas solutions, and we have adopted a Paas first strategy. So this is an area where I expect there may be a little bit less buy-in just now, because it does take governance and education in order to get your teams up to speed to take best advantage. Failing to invest in governance and education up front can mean that you're really only using 10% of the solution or only a little bit of its power, which in turn may result in, instead of cost savings, additional costs and investments that aren't necessary. We'll give everyone 3 more seconds to enter their results. And let's see where we've landed. So 50% have begun to explore Paas. The next highest is at 25% that Paas applications are not fully understood. 19% our teams have embraced Paas solutions, and 6% has adopted a Paas first strategy. Sounds to me like at least one of our attendees today has a very cloud-focused strategy, and the rest are really in exploratory mode, with Paas following along a little bit behind. Saas really is as to be expected in what is being seen in the market now. Thank you for responding to that poll as well. So next up, we will chat about infrastructure as a service. So with infrastructure as a service, this can really allow your infrastructure team to take hold of the environment, and rather than investing in hardware, they are investing in software for infrastructure purposes. Now here you can manage costs and time by eliminating the need to purchase hardware. Time, we've all seen issues with shipping, especially with some of the components that we need access to. So this can really be a leg up, especially with the COVID situation that we found ourselves in now. Being able to virtualize a lot of these environments have been really helpful. With IaaS, you can retain control over applications and infrastructure, and you do have increased flexibility to change out the hardware that you are using, because really it becomes software. So as your organization shifts or wants to explore different technologies, you've got a little bit more freedom to do that. But the catch here is that streamlining everything does come with some risks. So the risks, security and architecture need to be well understood. So once again here, the educational component and the governance should be in place, because the environments are becoming increasingly complex. There is a significant investment required on internal training to ensure that your team also has a solid understanding of what compliance and regulations look like. And it's important not to miss in having a good DR plan in place, because if you are taking a fully cloud-first approach and you're not considering disaster recovery, should something happen, data be compromised or an environment be compromised, you want to ensure you've got something that you can fail over to and restore. All right, this takes us to our next poll. By this point, you know the drill. So is infrastructure as a service a strategy that is on your roadmap? your options are, we are exploring infrastructure as a service. We have begun with training in architecture. We will implement this year, or our environment is infrastructure as a service first. All right, we will give everyone 10 more seconds to get their results in. Perfect. So the winner on this poll is A. 56% are exploring infrastructure as a service applications. And then we've got a tie for second place between our environment is infrastructure as a service first, and we will implement infrastructure as a service this year. Very interesting to see where everyone is focusing their energy. There's a lot of advantages here. And then last, we do have one respondent who is beginning to do their training in architecture in order to ensure the environment's ready. So thank you for responding to that poll as well, sharing some insight as to where you're at with your organization. Now, with all of these different as a service options that are available to us, everything as a service becomes a little bit of a recipe for potential disaster. We need to consider who is actually choosing these solutions, who is responsible for these solutions once they've been selected and implemented, and ultimately who's going to own these tools or the vendor relationships that come with them. Now, what I would suggest is that it has never been more important to establish partnerships between IT, security, and the business. All of our teams need to be well orchestrated and working together in concert to ensure that we can set up our organizations so that we are able to have stable technology that has security first and has the benefits of both of our customers, our end users, and also our clients in mind. So for that, there's 4 elements of good governance that are worth touching on. There's awareness, cloud strategy, data governance, privacy, security, and assurance. So let's touch on each of these briefly. Now, with awareness, it's important that all teams that could be looking at cloud solutions are aware of the risks and security and compliance considerations. So legal, privacy teams, compliance teams, IT, and even HR may need to be consulted when evaluating a cloud solution. With that, it's important to put some governance in place that actually has some interchange of dialogue or even the RFP process that ensures that everyone is being brought in from the beginning. Without doing that, there could be sort of a nasty surprise a little bit later on if you learn of new requirements for one department or another that not everyone was aware of. For the cloud strategy, I would encourage that everyone keep discussions of cloud technology at a very strategic level. The usage of these applications and the different cloud platforms that are available to us should be planned, because failure to do so and simply choosing to buy the next tool that seems to address a business need will create quite a big footprint, which opens up an organization to more risk. And it doesn't necessarily solve your business problems. It can result in creating a much more complex environment than it needs to be. And so usage matters. You don't want to be overinvested in collaboration tools, for example. You often see organizations that have multiple tools that do the exact same thing implemented. So if you've got Zoom, Slack, Teams, and RingCentral all in place, the question becomes, what is the tool that most of the business should be using, and do we truly need 4 flavors? There may be a very good reason why you do, but it should be an intentional decision so that you're not over-investing in redundant technology. The other part is that with cloud strategy and having the business potentially able to deploy anything they want from a software as a solution or as a service, you want to ensure that there's some governance in place where they're vetting the tools that they need. So they may not be fully aware of data classification and what it is that they're going to be putting into the cloud. Sure, it sounds great to enable a CRM that everybody can start using, but if that's PII data, what does that actually mean? Where does that data reside? Where do your customers reside? These questions are things that not everyone is aware of. And with GDPR and other compliance regulations in place, these conversations should be had early on, and there may need to be a cultural shift of awareness on regulations and security as well as compliance to ensure that everyone's heading in the same direction together. So this does touch on the data governance, privacy, and also security component. We do want to make sure that we're properly protecting ourselves, our customers, and our employees for any breach too. And so it is important to understand that the responsibility for security on cloud applications is shared. Cloud service providers may say that they are maintaining security for us, but we are each responsible for ensuring that data classification and fully understood requirements are aligned on, so that we've got the right SLAs in place to ensure that we're properly taken care of. We are all truly accountable for our environments, and really each business knows their business better than anyone else can. So while a CSP can tell you that something's going to offer the assurance that you're looking for, it's key that you have processes in place that allow you to do a little bit of investigation and understand for yourself, which does take us to the assurance slide. It's a big, big selling point. And the offloading of the management of information security is big business, but failure to understand what that means for your own organization interdepartmentally can mean that you've been promised something and you have received assurances that may not be truly deliverable. So this is where it's imperative for IT and security teams to be involved early on in any discussion for cloud solutions, even if it's software as a service, so that we can provide the best recommendations possible. So a question for you here: is your security team engaged when you put your technology forward? If you'd like, you can put your answers into the chat, but really it's something to mull over and ensure that through any RFP process, the right groups are going to be involved. Now, managing risk is really all of our business. And the question becomes, what can we do? So we as IT and security professionals need to almost become a different type of evangelist. You know, for years we've been talking about moving towards IT as a more service-oriented organization. Now we also need to bring about a cultural shift where security is at the forefront of everybody's mind. So I would suggest that we want to create more security-aware service organizations within IT. An option that I want to share with you, or a methodology, is the Cloud Octagon model. And this is something that has been developed by the Cloud Security Alliance, and it's designed to enable organizations to identify, represent, and assess the risks in context of their own cloud implementations. And bringing a model into place like this, or a methodology, really does position us so that we're able to evaluate with the same set of standards any technology that's being evaluated for our environment. Now, that's key for us because methodology really does help safeguard and put some guardrails around things so that we can ensure that there's a solid solution that has been put into place, and that security, scalability, all the cloud benefits that we've been promised can be realized, and it also minimizes our risk. Now, this model offers a few different components which we'll briefly touch on. We'll start with data classification. So the key here is understanding what the data is that you all will be putting into the cloud. So whatever the application is, it should be considered with regards to confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And when you think about this data and how it's classified, it's important that it's not just one single person, perhaps on the security team or IT team, that's doing the classification and giving their stamp of approval. Any data classification should be challenged and discussed to ensure that it really is the right classification. When you think about your cloud applications as well and how you're classifying them, it's not just about that single application that you're examining. It's actually about the applications that they'll be integrated to and what the data is that will be within them as well. And you also need to look at your integrations. So this one is definitely worth including in any RFP. It's language that you would like to have a solid understanding as to what the CSP's classifications and assurances are so that you can properly align with them. Countries is the next area that you want to focus on. So when you're working with your business partners, identifying all countries that are going to be utilizing the cloud solution is also a good starting point here. You need to understand how, or first, what data is going to be moved through the cloud and how it's going to be used, and then how the cloud is going to treat that data. So where will it be processed? Where will it be hosted? Where will it be transferred to? And how is it going to be stored? There are different regulations through different countries and for different organizations and industries. And all of that needs to ultimately be tied together. In addition, we want to take a look at any local requirements that need to be considered so that we have true assurance that we are taking our customers as well as our own best interests into account as we work with our CSPs. The procurement process is next. So if you do not have a solid procurement process in place, it may be the time to put one. And what this can do is it can help safeguard all teams and your organization to ensure that there's due diligence happening across the board and that everybody's involved in making the same decisions together and there's enough visibility before you procure a new tool. So the question becomes, who is responsible? If you don't have a procurement department, is there at least a set of gates that the business will go through in order to get approval on new tools before they're implemented? Here you can also set out, if you do have an RFP process, some standard security questions that are always asked, including a security annex, as well as your SLAs. Establishing those upfront and getting them responded to does give you a little bit of protection as well, because you want to ensure that you've got good documentation, because you're going to become part of the chain that is using the CSP's tools. Now, another important piece is to understand where your data is going to live and how you can have access to it. Is it portable? So should you choose to sever a contract, are you able to obtain the data that you have within the cloud? With platform as a service and infrastructure as a service, there generally you do have the ability to retain access to that. But with software as a service, sometimes that data isn't quite so portable. So understanding what that looks like upfront so that you know what you will and will not retain access rights to is key. And then within procurement as well, is also key to understand who within the cloud service provider actually has access to the environment and will be managing your environment as well as maintaining the tools for you. If they have signed off on different levels of SOC compliance and documentation, you not only want to have access to that and the updated yearly reports, but you want to have the ability to actually vet some of those details for yourself as well. And if you're not satisfied with the results that you get from an interview with their security person, then you may even want to do an on-site visit depending on how important this cloud application or tool is for your organization. IT governance is up next, and with governance, education is always key. Cloud technology is really a specialized investment, and you want to ensure that the teams that are responsible for governance do understand not only your business, regulations, compliance, as well as technology and security. So you'll want to put some policies in place to ensure that everyone is properly trained, that they have the right knowledge in these areas in order to support any type of procurement or maintenance of cloud environments, as well as architecture. If you don't have an IT steering committee, you will want to consider forming one. And within that, there may need to be a cloud-specific subcommittee as well, or you may want a cloud governance committee. And your planning function within the business, which can include architecture, should be well established so that you can make sure that you do solid cloud assessments and can properly integrate any cloud strategic roadmaps into your existing roadmap. Organizations that have been around longer that have very complex on-prem environments may need some additional work in order to prepare either their data or some of the solutions that they have in place for cloud tools. So having a strong enterprise architect, solutions architect, network architect, all helps as well. So there may be some investment in additional resources within the team. For your risk process, you'll want to ensure that you formally review any of the documentation that is available from your cloud service provider. It is a shared responsibility. It is always in your best interest to vet and validate the information that's being shared. So there was a time several years ago when it was commonplace to believe that everyone who had a cloud offering, who had a SOC report, would be up to date and everything would be a non-issue. As we've seen, there have been more and more data breaches, in part because there's more and more interest in trying to access some of these tools, and the big players, as their names become known, become a target. But it is on each of our plate to make sure that we do our own examination and understand what the processes are that are being followed and what the methodology is to ensure that breaches can't occur as well. So risk identification is key. you may come across, as with anything in compliance, something that doesn't quite meet your standards, but it's close enough. So the question is, are there different safeguards you can put into place that are going to satisfy your needs? And if so, can you also prepare a request so that the CSP can ensure that this is going to be addressed in short order as well? So there should be a remediation plan that's being developed to go with any kind of risk assessment where you're accepting more risk than you would like to from a CSP. Architecture we've touched on. Now, all cloud journeys should start with talking to the architects is a nice quote, because you may want to consider whether you want to reuse existing things or build or buy. And this comes directly from the Cloud Security Alliance group. And so definitely consider architecture as a discipline to invest in if it's not one that you have in the past. Your architects will be able to better examine the workload characteristics of what you're trying to offload to the cloud, take a look at application integration, perimeter security, and also take a look at your network and ensure that you're truly prepared for all of the cloud technology that you may want to invest in. Development and engineering is also key. So ensuring that your teams have secure coding training is going to be a big part of making sure that they're successful. If they don't have good processes on-prem, they won't have good processes as they move into the cloud. And as we touched on earlier, failure to take advantage of some of the sort of methodologies and ways to ensure quality is actually failure to take full advantage of what these tools offer to you. In addition to the secure coding practices and ensuring that you've got some solid CI/CD pipelines in place, you do want to ensure that there's monitoring and dashboarding in place as well to maintain visibility into what's happening in your environment. Particularly with platform as a service and infrastructure as a service, you are responsible for everything that's happening in there. So development of these processes in part and parcel with governance and architecture is key. And you'll want to focus on maturing your RT organization in order to take advantage of these cloud tools. And another key component is the chain of service providers. So often tools, and particularly SaaS tools, have a series of cloud service providers who are supporting each other and building on each other's technology. So you may have an e-commerce platform, for example, that is branded but built on another CSP's tools. As the purchaser of this technology, you're actually responsible for ensuring that every leg of the journey is adequately secured. So understanding when you go through the procurement process exactly how a tool is architected and built is key. And this will allow you to better examine what the assurances are of each provider and make a decision as to whether or not the tool is right for you in your environment. So in closing, what I would suggest is that in order to take best advantage of building cloud strategy and the tools that are available now, with costs that are coming down, more innovation than ever, and the need to enable agile teams, you'll want to think first on how we can align cloud strategy to our business outcomes. And once that's really documented, assessing your organizational cloud readiness, including architecture and security understanding, as well as establishing that governance is going to be key to your success. And I would offer as a resource to you the Cloud Security Alliance website, link here. I'm more than happy to also distribute these slides. So if you're interested, please find me on LinkedIn and send me a message. And that is the close of my presentation. So Jason, I think we might have a couple of questions that have come in.
Excellent stuff. Yeah, thank you so much, Jen. Really appreciate that insight there. Greatly. And we do have some questions. I have some questions for you. We have a couple of questions coming in from the audience as well. So we'll tackle a couple of those. So first and foremost, do you see an uptake of cloud solutions in highly regulated enterprises? If you say yes, what would be the primary reason?
That is a great question, and one that I can share with you is near and dear to my heart, because in the industry that I'm in now, which is really space and defense, we would love to use cloud tools, but there's always the question on regulations, protected data, as well as ITAR data, and how it can be managed. So there's compliance requirements in this industry that means that you cannot transmit this data, across international borders, and how you store and manage it is key. Now, the cloud service providers are also really aware of this, and they are working as well to ensure that they're able to meet the requirements as they exist. And there's discussions going on with regulators to ensure that there's more that's made available to us. So I do think that clouds are evolving to better support highly regulated industries, and industries themselves are beginning to evaluate what those standards look like. I do think that the more benign tools, where maybe it's only employee data that's PII, is something that even the highly regulated industries may be able to take advantage of. So for example, there's collaboration tools that are not considered at risk because they wouldn't have the same level of data. But at the end of the day, it does come down to data classification and training your people and making sure that your people know where the different types of data can and cannot be used. So as we all know, it's a combination of people, process, and tools.
Yeah, and just a quick follow on, because you're talking about data. We know obviously in BC they have pretty strict rules around data protection and governance and that. I mean, so for an organization, I mean, you're based there, how do you kind of combat working across provincial lines when it comes to these kind of areas in the cloud?
Yeah, so I would say that it's really important that you tread very carefully. You don't want to be putting your data in any kind of situation where it would be at risk, but often when you work with the different CSPs, you can find ways to either have your data hosted that is amenable to the rules and regulations that are in place, but not everything is available just yet. So I think that even though cloud has been available for quite some time, there's still some changes in some of the rules and regulations we have, as well as some technology changes that can be made to better support. So I think that it's a very broad answer to a specific question. At the end of the day, for each use case, you need to understand how that data is going to be used and maintained, and then dive in.
Great. And a little bit of insight from your experiences personally as well. Obviously, retail sector is where you've come from. Retail manufacturing, I suppose, to a certain extent, right? And then moving into the space industry. So talk us through a little bit about I suppose the level of innovation you have between each kind of organization or industries, and how, you know, cloud can feed that, obviously, and the obstacles you've come up against in the space industry, where in the past you may not have come up against these obstacles, or vice versa.
Excellent question. So what I would say is that the regulations and compliance that the industries are looking at are quite different, because on retail and manufacturing side, you're really looking at PCI, so the payment data card industries, and how payments are being processed and how we're protecting businesses, banks, and individuals from fraud, as well as leaking their personal data. On the other side of the coin, where I am now, it's not just personal information and data which we need to worry about. There's less payment information, but then there is also secure data designs on products and information as well that we're more concerned with. So how one innovates really begins to change and shift. On the retail side, there's a lot of tried and true practices, and there's a lot of SaaS solutions that fit really well for the industry. So innovation there is more about how you can deploy a combination of tools in order to better access and customize for your customers. On the space and defense industry, really you are constantly building and innovating in a new way. So this is where I think there's going to be a strong advantage should platform as a service and infrastructure as a service be tools that are usable for a different organization.
Brilliant, thank you very much. On behalf of the attendees here, a virtual round of applause for Jen. Thank you.